Debbie Dingell, Democratic strategist at the big table. Debbie, welcome. How are you?
It's good. Good to see you.
Wearing white on the island. Look at that.
She's the queen of Mackinac.
It's Mackinac.
So you arrived yesterday, and how do you feel in terms of the vibe here this year?
Well, I'm sad about one thing. I've been coming to Mackinac for longer. I think I'm probably one of the longest, not oldest, longest attending people here. And I wish that there were more policymakers, because I think this is a very important place for people to build trust, build relationships, to have dialogue. So you wish the state legislators and more members of Congress were going to be here, but it's great to get everybody together again.
Well, Debbie, how does that change the dynamic of what goes on up here, not having the lawmakers on the island?
Well, I think it changes the tone of the debate. I think the business leaders will get together here and they'll talk to each other, but they do that down when they're in the Detroit area as well. So it'll be interesting, but we've got dynamic speakers. It will generate a lot of thought making, and how do you translate that into everybody that's got to come together and actually translate it into action will be.
But it is something they have to fix, right? I mean,
it is. Now, you all were talking about before I joined the table, Detroit, and the Detroit policymakers will be here, and that will. So those issues will start to be addressed. But you know, something you don't hear a lot of people talk about is the fact that there are a lot of smaller towns and cities in southeastern Michigan that are facing some very real issues,
they're in a lot of trouble,
facing potential bankruptcy, etc. And at some point, the dialogue's got to start to include the leadership of those small towns. And this personal property tax issue is threatening bankruptcy of many cities across the Tri-County area.
And specifically, the Free Press did an article on Allen Park and some of the issues that honestly, you're absolutely right. A lot of cities are facing now.
But it's not just Allen Park was a good example.
That was the point, that it's everybody in the state, because of the way that we structure municipalities, because of the way we limit the way that they can raise taxes and things like that. They're all facing financial challenges that could push them into insolvency. You will have dozens of cities on either the EM watch list or with emergency managers within a few years if we don't do something to sort of change the way that all works.
Aren't there a number of cities on the list right now, or in terms of the critical list or the watch list?
Oh yeah, I mean, and Allen Park's one of them. I mean, Allen Park is right there on the brink, and that's a middle class suburb that people don't think of in the same category as Detroit.
But how many have done the things that the governor's asked them to do? And that is get their employee costs and their legacy costs under control by going to an 80-20 healthcare split and going to 401ks instead of defined benefit pensions.
More than you think. Over the weekend, I was in many smaller towns and municipalities, Ypsi Township, and they're facing a lot of crises. Like, policemen are being forced to retire now. These police and fire forces that have, you've got to look at how do you merge, what's the answer going to be. But as you're going to the 80-20, and they're all doing it as they're going into the next round of negotiations for their fire and police, they're having to retire to protect what they've had.
And the thing about 80-20 is it fixes the problem going forward. It doesn't fix the problem that you already have. So, for example, in Detroit, you've got 22,000 retirees, all who have defined benefit pensions and health care. That liability is carrying the city into fiscal trouble, and you have that same problem in other places. The governor has not yet said he's willing to address that issue on a statewide level. I'm not sure he's going to have a choice.
So even though the legislators aren't here this week, they're working on the budget. What do you think are the three headlines that we're going to see out of this conference this week, whether it's on the conference agenda or not, Debbie?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that you may see some news made up here that'll start to break in the next couple of days. I'll keep that quiet for the moment.
That is such a tease.
Can you give us transportation?
Transportation.
I think we've got some very thoughtful, challenging speakers. I think Mr. Friedman can't come to this island. Remember, he's said some pretty controversial things in the past. He'll probably talk about the auto industry. He was one that said, "Is it bad for me to want General Motors to go bankrupt?" So his words became reality.
He's the Mitt Romney of the conference right now.
Very interesting. All right. So what do you think, Stephen, would be your three top?
Well, I think Detroit, obviously, and because you've got the Detroit lawmakers here, and there aren't a lot of other lawmakers here, they're going to get more attention than they normally would. Detroit is a centerpiece of the agenda, at least for the morning tomorrow. I think that is going to be one of the big things. I also think, like Nolan said, the governor defending some of the reforms that he has has pushed through, which are sort of under attack. You've got this ballot initiative for the emergency manager law. I think he'll address that some today and talk about why that's worth defending in his view. But again, I think also this sort of cloud that's hanging over municipal government in Michigan, the idea that it's sort of unsustainable the way we have it structured now, and no one has an answer as to what we could do differently.
All right, Nolan, give us your 2 cents.
I will agree. There'll be a lot of work done on moving Detroit off the dime. There will be a lot of strategizing about how to defeat this myriad of ballot proposals. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some new plan to push ahead the bridge.
Okay, very interesting.
Without the legislature.
Without the legislature.
Clearly, yeah.
I do agree. No, the people are not talking about the ballot proposals. We are looking at probably 10 ballot proposals. I think most people have not focused on it, don't understand the depth, the breadth of it. I think the session on Thursday is going to focus people more on.
And that's a session on.
There is a session Thursday just on ballot proposals, and it will be not only on collective bargaining, but I think one of the big issues, the 25 by 25, which I think proponents of it or opponents of it will talk
renewable
about
energy.
how it's going to increase energy prices.
People should get used to a very key phrase about all of those ballot proposals. It's just going to be called vote no.
Just
vote no, and that's the problem that they're all going to have. Some of them may have more merit than others. Some of them are real stinkers. The problem is that you've got so many that the easiest way to deal with them is for people to just say, forget
down
it.
the line.
Just vote no on all of them.
And it's important that the chamber and other opponents of these major ballot proposals don't try to pick and choose. Just lump them all together and say, sorry guys, you may have some merit this time, but just vote no on everything on that ballot.
Let's talk about the Senate race. We know that Debbie Stabenow is going to be here. I haven't heard a lot in the last little bit about that race right now.
Well, because she's crushing in that race. I mean, that's a race that
I think
that
Nolan
you would
just
expect.
turned red.
You would Steve and I don't agree on this. I believe that this state is far more competitive than it.
She'll win by 15 points.
Well, not just the Senate
well,
race.
Debbie, is she going to participate?
I'm writing all this down, by the way.
Is she going to participate this week?
She'll be up here. She'll be at events. I don't know if she'll be on the congressional panel. Her name is
she
not
was
listed.
committed, though, wasn't she?
I think you need to ask the conference.
I'll let you ask.
But I do believe that I really was more focused on the presidential race, but that has everybody then that's in on the ballot downwards. And I believe that Michigan's going to be far more competitive than people think it's going to be.
She has to say that because
But
they're still out raising money.
Listen, this is a state that's gone Democrat every election since '88, and yet the last poll we had it a couple weeks ago, the race was within 5 points. This is a close race. He should be up in Michigan by 20.
Mitt Romney mixed whenever he is asked nationwide, what state are you going to deliver that you didn't do last time? He never gives more than one answer. He says Michigan. And when you look at where his super PAC is spending, he's not up in Wisconsin. He's up in Michigan. Here. They're spending here for a reason. Yeah. Now, I think we'll win, but I think it's competitive.
He's got to worry about Virginia and North Carolina and Iowa before he gets anywhere close to Michigan.
Let's talk real quick about the issues with Ed McCotter and his campaign and gathering the signatures. I mean, I think that was a real huge surprise to everyone that only out of 2,000 signatures, only about 300 were actually valid.
245, I think. It is the most monumental screw up in Michigan election history, I think. All he needed was 1,000 signatures. He couldn't get them. And now a seat that was drawn for him, 55% Republican, is very much at risk of going to the Democrats this time because he couldn't get his position. Oakland County Republican leaders are beside themselves. They tried to draft David Trott this weekend to run. Trott decided this morning he wasn't going to run. McCotter now, instead of running a race that cost about $150,000, $200,000, has to raise upwards of $2 million to wage a successful write-in, and he is a very mediocre fundraiser.
And he probably won't win. I'm not sure he can pull that out.
I'm not sure he can.
And we are going to continue this conversation. All right, hang tight really quick. You are watching our coverage of My Vote Mackinac of the 2012 Mackinac Policy Conference. Stick around. We'll be right back.